Hey, my name is Ryan Earnhardt from CreativeSoundLab.tv, where audio recording is an art form. Well, today we're going to be talking about creating your own unique distorted vocal effect. This technique is really simple. Here's the mix without the vocal effect. This is just a dry vocal in a mix.
Girl, you had me right at midnight. Now you got someplace else to go. Oh, you're tripping down a staircase. Slip glass slippers on your toes.
And here is the effect that we're going to be creating today in the context of a mix.
Girl, you had me right at midnight. Now you got someplace else to go. Oh, you're tripping down a staircase. Slip glass slippers on your toes.
Okay, so I arrived at this technique kind of over time. I started doing reamping for guitars and bass guitars, and then drums, and then eventually experimenting with vocal. And I really found that when I reamped vocal, sometimes I didn't always just do it for the close mic, miking up a small guitar amp, small tube amp just for that vocal. But instead I would actually find that the room sound of that vocal reamping session was actually more useful to the mix. A lot of times I would record both, but I just end up using the room sound and really kind of have basically a free reverb. I didn't have to use any sort of processing with my computer or anything like that. And it sounded really, really cool. So I'm going to be walking you through basically how I set it up and how I created that effect. Okay, so this technique is really pretty simple. In your DAW, you just have to specify an external output for your main vocal track. You can also, if you're really lazy, you could just hit solo and pan it to the right, take the feed for your right speaker and run it out to a reamp box like this. But a lot of times, it's best if you have a dedicated output, like output 3, for example. And so in your DAW, specify for your vocal track to go to output 3 to this box. This box only receives that vocal track. And then from here, it goes to the guitar amp. Now, a lot of times I do record the amp. It's just a habit. I don't feel right not recording the amp. So I usually get the direct sound just in case that I really like that sound. But really the focus today is going to be on the room mics. These room mics are the AEA N8. They're an active ribbon microphone, and they're going to be set up in the Tony Faulkner configuration. Let's talk a little bit about what that configuration is, and then we'll have some listening demos. So in our recording today, we're going to be using the Tony Faulkner configuration. It works by placing two figure-8 microphones right next to each other, pointing the exact same direction. And these two figure-8 microphones are spaced 20 centimeters apart. Now, our source is going to be down here, the guitar amp, and our main goal is to capture a stereo recording of the room sound. Now, the Tony Faulkner configuration works great for any sort of narrow room situation. In this case, it's a single guitar amp at the other end of the live room. I don't know that I would be trying this over a drum set, but the guitar amp is fairly far away, and it's centered between these two mics. So the reason why I chose two ribbon mics is because I really like how they sound at a distance from sources. I could have tried large diaphragm condensers, but usually large diaphragms, they sound a little funny when put into figure-8 polar patterns. And I actually like how they sound better in an omnidirectional polar pattern when at a distance. Figure-8 gives us a really balanced sound. They're naturally figure-8, and it gives us the control. For this configuration, it needed two figure-8s, and they sound great at a distance. That's why we're going to be trying out the N8 in the Tony Faulkner configuration. Let's see how it sounds. Here is just the dry vocal.
Girl, you had me right at midnight. Now you got someplace else to go.
Now here is just the AEA N8s in the Tony Faulkner configuration.
Girl, you had me right at midnight. Now you got someplace else to go. Oh, you're tripping down a staircase. Slip glass slippers on your toes.
And here's the dry vocal with the room mics.
You were wrong about that apple. It holds the seeds of death and life. Your seeds lie dormant in a casket. Princely men, they came and tried.
So one thing I like about these N8s is that they do have a little bit more volume and level, so I don't have to really crank my preamps, especially in a room situation where I'm using a real tiny amp like this. They also have a really nice balance sound that I find pretty flattering for this application. This configuration is pretty interesting. It's not exactly wide and it's not completely narrow either. But one thing is for sure, it definitely has really good phase relationships. Here are both microphones put together in a mono mix.
Girl, you had me right at midnight. Now you got someplace else to go.
What I'm going to do now is flip the polarity of just one of the mics, keep it in a mono mix, and let's go back and forth between the good phase and the out of phase sound.
Now you were wrong about that apple. It hold the seeds in death and life. Your seeds lie dormant in a casket. Princely men, they came and tried.
Now this test is a great trick. No matter what you're recording, you could always be flipping the polarity and see if you lose signal or if you lose strength. Always choose the stronger of the two options. So one of my favorite things to do when using this technique, capturing a really dirty vocal sound and combining it with a clean sound in a mix, is to actually delay the room mics. It creates kind of a slapback sound, but it's kind of a really edgy, raw sound. This is about 100 milliseconds of delay.
Girl, you had me right at midnight. Now you got someplace else to go. Are you tripping down a staircase? Girl, you had me right at midnight. Now you got someplace else to go. Are you tripping down a staircase? Step glass slippers on your toes.
So you can hear that this delay really does add a lot of character to the sound of the vocal. It almost is not nearly as cool without this aspect of adding delay to the room sound. Now before the dry vocal signal gets to the guitar amp, I compressed it by using a Warm Audio WA76 in all buttons mode. This ensured that the overdrive that I got from this little tiny amp was fairly consistent across all the dynamic range of that vocal track, and it helped me to really dial in the sweet spot at the amp. And this actually is a great tip because you want to be listening to the dry vocal. So if they have kind of a thin sounding voice, then a muddy sounding room would probably be okay to pair with that thin sounding vocal. So feel free to add compression, EQ to shape the sound of the amp and really have a broad perspective that it's not really what the amp sounds like, but it's what the room sounds like with the amp playing sound into that room. Ultimately, we want a good pairing of the room sound with the dry vocal.
Girl, you had me right at midnight. Now you got someplace else to go. Are you tripping down a staircase? Step glass slippers on your toes.
Okay, let me know if you have any questions about this. I know this is just a really quick overview, so I didn't cover everything, but let me know if you have any questions. I'll be hanging out in the comments below.